Ni hao. Huanying light out Shanghai Major. We are here with the Asia RMR preview. It's the double swing. I've got two experts of the Asian scene to join me because, to be frank, I don't know half these rosters. I've looked through them, I've examined their match histories, and I've scratched my head a bit at some of these constructions because they seem a bit messy, but we've got experts with me.
Je suis Asia. Well, we're all doing bad languages. There you go.
And I'm not even going to touch that. We already had French John Cena introing.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. We've got TeaTime joining us, who is known for his ability to endlessly converse. And of course, his chemistry with Yumi is pre-existing. Almost too much chemistry, if you'd believe what Yumi said before the show. But before we get into all of that good stuff, before we start making those picks, we do have to recap the last event, the Blast World Final. Things have continued to go catastrophically for Yumi. As co-host of the show, you'd think he's got his reps in. He'd understand how to pick winners. Unfortunately not. Only 1 point from Astralis fluking a semi-final. Let's be real, that's as empty of a point as it comes. 2 points for the viewers, picking Spirit. An underdog made the final. And 3 for me, because I'm just better at this. Right.
I picked Na'Vi, like the team that's made like 6 consecutive grand finals, and they go out last. It is a talent at this point. Like, I have the worst timing. Sometimes I pick teams, and then immediately afterwards, it's like, oh, we can't field our full roster. That does suck. We did kind of forget about the Jack standing in thing with Vitality, yes. Which was a little, that's a big oversight, to be quite honest. But then I get an interview from Blade being like, if we win this tournament, we might even be too confident for the major. And so it's like, they weren't even trying. They weren't even trying. I don't know, man.
Listen, I'm glad that you got your jabs in at Michael, but also, did you slide in that Astralis making top 4 was a fluke? What the hell? They 2-0 Na'Vi and Mouse. What are you on about, man?
I've seen this before. I've seen this exact series of events before from pretty much this group of players. They make bullshit playoff appearances, completely collapse over and over again. It's just a nice little point for us on the double swing. If you get them as an underdog pick, they'll get you a point from cheesing playoff appearances. But realistically, they're no real threat to win events. So I call it nonsense. Tomfoolery.
Just because a team makes playoffs and they can't win the tournament, it's not nonsense. What is this?
It is complete nonsense, because whoever they play in that playoff bracket, if there's a stage involved, any amount of crowd, 15 people in the garbage man, they're going to lose. That's just the Yabian way at this point, so I'm not too worried, and I'll keep disrespecting those events every time I can.
They beat Na'Vi and Mouse. Like, what more can they do? With Cadian's arm being broken. Like...
Yeah, not interested. I've seen it all before.
You know what? I'm just gonna say it. I don't care that you broke your arm. I actually don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't move me. It doesn't move me in the slightest. But hey, we're talking about Asia today. Already, we've taken up enough of the show with other regions. Let's focus in on this one because it's been up and coming for the entirety of Counter-Strike, but finally, it's coming up to somewhere. TeaTime, you have first pick. Please surprise us. Who are you taking?
Oh, guys, why are you saying surprises? I have the one advantage of having first pick. Now you're putting me on the spot. This is so unfair. This is what happens. Let me peel back the curtain for you guys, okay? What happens is that KingT gives the guest first pick, and then he makes them feel bad for picking the obvious one, be it like Mongolz, be it Na'Vi, whatever it is, right? So now I have to go out and I have to make the wild prediction, and I'm not even going to get extra points for it because he's rigged the system. This is why Michael keeps losing, because King has rigged the system. This is the problem with monarchies. You all suck. But enough about that. I think Talon is going to be coming through over here for my pick overall. And I know that I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit on the underdog overdog thing, but you've now made me feel bad about picking Mongolz.
You can have him as an underdog if you want.
I want to pick them as a favorite. I'm picking them as a favorite to come through. That's what I'm doing.
Now that is against the rules.
I better get extra points for this one.
All right,
is that actually you're locked in?
Yeah.
Like that's your first
I am
pick?
locking in Talon as my first pick. There you go.
Oh, this is a classic already. Please tell me in great descriptive detail what you see in this team.
I've got this. I have reasoning behind this. All right, guys. Number one, obviously Mongolz is going to be picked out. But whoever picks Mongolz over here, let me make this clear. You're losers. Whoever picks Mongolz right now, you're just going for the easy way out. So the other one then comes forward. It's probably FlyQuest, right? That's what everyone's thinking. Oh, they just won ESL Challenger Atlanta. Normally you're going to see an Australian team coming out. Sure, they didn't make it last time over, but that's because they made terrible decisions about whether to boot camp or not. And that's all, by the by. But here's the thing. I've always felt like Talon is a superior Australian team. And if I'm going to be having one Australian team going forward, it's going to be Talon. I think MHL is a better offer than Alistair, even if Alistair looked pretty good in Atlanta, and I do think he was underrated by people. I still think MHL is better. I very frankly think Azur's a better caller than Dexter is. What has Dexter done? Dexter's taken a mouse sports team that's looked 10 times better without him, and then he went into a FlyQuest team that had made every single major, and then he didn't make the major with them. Sure, he won Atlanta, and he did a pretty good job on that one, but we gloss over that so that I can say Talon are going to be my favorites.
How can you even call them the better Australian team when they're like brand new? Basically, they've played. I mean, they've been boot camping in Europe. They've played a lot of like tier 3 teams and lost.
I'm gonna counter that out. I'm gonna counter that out by saying it's precisely because I haven't seen them play that I think they're the better Australian team, because I haven't seen FlyQuest play. I have seen them play. I have seen them ruin the Australian scene. I may have hit my table too hard for that one, but I have seen them play. That's the difference. The unknown is better than the known bad.
Yumi, do you want to take a shot at this?
I don't mean, I just don't like. I've watched a few of the Talon demos, and I do agree MHL is a better offer than Alistair. In terms of like consistency, he does a lot. I think Nedic is quite exciting. I don't think they call a very good game though. Like, especially when I watch them on CT sides, just don't. It's like if MHL isn't just re-swinging everything, or Nedic is like hard fighting everything, they don't move. They actually play super defensive CT sides. They just wait for mistakes to happen. And I don't think this team is like isn't mechanically gifted. I actually think they're a pretty high like mechanical ceiling team, probably rivaling to a FlyQuest. I just don't believe this team is ready.
Okay. I mean, I will point this out. I never said they're good at calling. I said he's a better IGL than Dexter. That's the standard I'm holding them to right now, because I'm just going to come out of here and say, I think Dexter has made his players look worse than they were when Inns was calling, funnily enough, and I didn't know how that would be possible, because it felt like when Inns was calling, everyone was so incredibly good individually, and they couldn't really play too well together, with the exception of Atlanta, which I will say adds a blip in the radar to what I'm saying. I genuinely believe that if you look over towards a lot of the T-side demos of FlyQuest before, one of the reasons why players like Alistair were looking worse than they actually are, and I don't think he's a fantastic opera, but I don't think he's as bad as he looked, was because he just didn't have people covering for him when he's scoped into an angle. There's people flanking him, getting backstabs all the time. Players don't know what's going on. It's clearly not a very well-drilled T side. And don't even get me started on the fact that Urkast is for some reason their coach. I mean, if you're not going to want to replace anyone out for European presence, at least make the coach something a little bit of a step up, right? Instead of making it look like a bit of a Nepo baby hire in that position. So yeah, I really don't rate FlyQuest's calling. What I will say is I think they have a better individual player in Inns. I think Inns is probably one of the best players, if not the best player outside of Mongolz in this entire RMR. So yeah, FlyQuest on paper, especially because of Atlanta, would be better, but also then it's no fun, right? So I'd rather have Talon coming out on top, because I do think that it's a better called team than at least the FlyQuest side is. And you know what? Repeaking in with again and again and swinging with MHL, that kind of works in Asia, Michael. I know we've been watching this for 4 years, so you can't say it doesn't.
I know. I just don't. I just think if they did make the major, they will be my 0-3 team very confidently.
I agree with you. 100%. I'm with you.
Right. For me to not consider this an absolutely insane pick, I have to believe that everyone at this event is worse than Na'Vi Jr., Permitter, Cybershock, Rhino.
Saving strats for the RMR.
Na'Vi Jr. is kind of legit, to be fair.
Na'Vi Jr. is the most legit one, yes.
Yeah.
Saving strats, you don't get to, but Na'Vi Jr. blew them out like nothing I'd ever seen before. And if I want to believe in this team mechanically, you had to take some scalps when it came to Na'Vi Jr. You had to make maps close, you had to take your pick at least, because they're a team who are going to give you a lot of fights. Like, if you watch them play, sure, they have a lot of great elaborate setups, but they also have Makaze who will just sit and fight you straight up.
Right.
It's kind of a problem I've been noticing in his demos recently. But but Talon had no one who could really even go toe-to-toe with him. Crabini had his way. Yes, the other losses are closer. They took a map off Rhino, but for crying out loud, if my last desperate attempt to salvage some hope in Talon is that they took a map off of Rhino, we've got some serious issues here.
But was this Rhino with Agile or no?
It was with Agile.
There you go. There you go. Saul just won an ESL Challenger Katowice with Simple, with Eternal Fire there. Agile's playing for Salt.
Agile bot fragged, and yeah, people I've never heard of were
Katowice champion, okay?
It doesn't matter to me, and it never will.
It's still a best of one versus FlyQuest, right? Because on paper, if anyone's picking Mongolz or FlyQuest as their favorites, those are the expected ones. It's a BO1. It's domestic. I think there's more demos to be able to watch out for FlyQuest. I think there's a lot more holes to exploit in FlyQuest, and I think Talon's going to be better prepared for FlyQuest going into this one. So I'm just saying, I think Talon's my favorite over here.
All right. I mean, I've left them in your picks. I've left them as the underdog just so that you have a chance later on to pick a better team. And I hope for your sakes you can.
You ruined me. You said surprise me. The second you said that, I had to switch away from Mongolz.
I've said that 1,000 times on this show just to lead into.
I'm sorry to be the only one who doesn't disappoint.
And you're the first person to ever go, you know what? Fuck you, and just pick an underdog outright.
To be fair, Tech Girl did also like curveball pick like an underdog when she probably should have picked a favorite. I do remember.
And she's working the major, guys. Are you?
Yeah, she picked an Astralis pick that got her no points, but to be fair, she already had Na'Vi and Furion made points, so
yeah.
No, she kind of got away with that one because she already had a good pick in the bank. She had one lined up from the start. Right. So yeah, this is going to be interesting to find out because I kind of believe in your idea of the BO1. It's a little more chaotic than what we typically see, and especially as I feel like we're hinting towards one of those classic Valve moments where they just go, oh, for the major, by the way, here's the map pool, and they've just added trade.
No,
I've got a feeling deep in my soul that this is going to happen, and I'm going to love it. It's a terrible idea, but it's so Valve.
We're not airdropping overpass into the pool.
Can you imagine? Valve just goes and specifically says, fuck you to Astralis after they finally get good on a map. And they're just like, Astralis has been working super hard. Caden's been doing so much practice on vertical that he's broken his arm trying to get those weird vertical flicks. Everything's going on. And finally, Device is feeling like, oh my God, am I going to get to see a crowd again? Am I going to be at a major? And, even the major, it's in Shanghai. So all of those stages are going to have crowds of like 3,000-4,000. And Valve just comes in, nope, we're adding Drain back.
Would be amazing. But also, he did get to see a crowd in Singapore. He then proceeded to shit the bed alongside his two riflers. So,
don't blame my Tom Cruise. What the fuck?
I'm going to blame whoever I damn well please. And on that team, there's so many choices. So, yeah, I guess. Just for you, I'll pretend it wasn't Device's fault either.
Thanks.
Yumi, you volunteered to take the second pick.
Yeah.
Are you gonna go for something completely out of left field as well?
No,
I'm picking
I'm picking the Mongolz. Why wouldn't I pick the Mongolz? Maybe a little bit. We were a bit down on this team in some of the previous events where we've, had the option to pick them and been like, they're a little shaky. They may have hit their ceiling. But they are the biggest give me into this RMR. They just come off a win at Thunderpick. They beat Heroic. They beat a 3D Max that have been actually kind of like a tier 2 gatekeeper type team that, that's the type of team that when you have Rare Atom, when you have Talon, when you have these teams coming over to Europe to boot camp and playing in these online cups, 3D Max is, I guess, the bar that you need to beat, and the Mongolz beat them pretty handily, and also handled a Heroics that are also powering up. So, yeah, it is not a surprise. I'm picking the Mongolz. With my luck, they may just go out dead last, but that's the way of things, I guess.
Yeah, it is sometimes. And look, if we talk about them being shaky, right, and we talk about how they have these sort of seemingly like a ceiling that feels really high and a floor that sometimes looks bottomless, just because of the volatile nature of some of their playstyle. Their top end, beating 3D Max and Heroic on LAN to win $500,000, you'll take that if you're an org like Mongolz. If that's the dice you're rolling.
They've won 3 international LANs this year.
They have, and they won the Thunderpick World Championship, something that was online, I believe.
For most of it, and then the final was online.
To qualify here, yeah. So they beaten on those runs. I'm trying to point out these runs. They've beaten a lot of good teams, a lot of really solid European, Brazilian teams.
I mean,
and then Heroic
even
are
on
just straight up tier 1.
Even in the tournaments that they lose, very often they will take one big scalp, actually. So
Yeah.
you will see, like, I think it was Cologne where they were the ones who beat Spirit first. I mean, they sort of enabled Saw's run as well. I think they might have been, it was either G2 or Spirit that they beat first.
Spirit.
Yeah,
G2
they
lost
did,
to
yeah.
Saw, they
It was
lost
Spirit.
to... Yeah.
Yes. So it was, they generally do get like at least one good head and everything. So it's always a team where it feels really nice to have like a classic dark horse back in overall competition, like just in tier 1 in general, to be able to say like, hey, there's this team. You don't know if they're going to bomb out and be like, 9th to 11th place, or if they're just going to come through and beat like the number 1 team in the world or top 3 team in the world at the very least and just eliminate them from the tournament because of that, right? So it's nice to see that again, because I do feel like for so long we've gone away from that in Counter-Strike, because there's generally a very strong top 5, 6, and after that it feels like they just beat pretty much anyone unless their name is G2, in which case who the fuck knows what they're going to do. So yeah, that being said though, it is bold for you to pick Mongolz, Michael, because considering the fact that they are going up against, the legendary BinTet, the first ever Asian export into the West. You're looking at the Korean Hwarang, the last soldier coming out from there, Zain, who's somehow still not gone from military duty, even though he said he's going to like a couple of times. Then you've got obviously Dobu coming in at substitute. You think they're going to beat Alter Ego in that first best of 1? Michael, what's going on with you?
Is he the first international like Asian export? I swear that was like Splice with machine gun.
It was machine gun, yeah, but
Yeah,
like
come on, man.
It doesn't sound as impressive if I don't lie.
Come on, man.
I gotta lie sometimes,
I was like, wait a second, I feel like you're quizzing me here because it was a Mongolian.
The first international one who did something happy.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. To be honest, I have a soft spot for Zain, but they are going to get absolutely rocked. So I'm just kind of here for that, If they do cause the upset, though, big ups them, the soul of South Korea.
You know what does suck, though? It sucks that, there's a term in English, and again, guys, second language English speaker, I gotta complain about this. It sucks that there's a term called soft spot, but if I say I have a hard spot, it doesn't mean the opposite. It somehow also means the same thing. So I wanted to point out that I absolutely hate the fact that BinTet is actually qualified out to the RMR. I think BinTet's generally been a bit of a scam overall, but I can't say, I've got a hard spot for BinTet, because that just sounds wrong, guys. Get your language in order, please.
Yeah, saying you have a hard spot for someone does not quite interpret the same as soft spot at all, even if it could be interpreted positively. I don't think anyone ever will, not at least on this show. But an interesting detail that has come out recently, I've been interacting with a French man who is incredibly into stats. If you haven't heard of him, he's kind of done the rounds on the French sort of podcast scene recently with KRL, talking about numbers and stuff.
Okay.
But he published some spreadsheets, and amongst them were some stats I've developed with him, including one for explosive fragging, like players making multi-kills of within a small time frame, but across a wide angle. And he has the Mongolz in tier 2. Let's just ignore his tiers of everything and just look at the raw numbers. 3 players from Mongolz topped out tier 2 and would have been amongst the top 15 to 20 tier 1 had they been allowed to be compared directly. They are a team with so many dynamic young players that realistically, they don't have to outcall anyone at this event. They can go in, play a pug, and just outfrag most of these teams on a bad day. So the fact that they can also on a good day go out and win tier 1.5 cups, big events, almost be competitive at big events, really. I think for them, there should be a walk in the park, and it's almost a done deal already that they should be through. If they don't go through, it'll be the talk of the RMRs until G2 inevitably go down 1-2.
Would you say that in that case, picking Mongolz is just the most cowardly move you can make on this podcast?
Oh, come on, man.
This podcast is about winning. And it's also about giving to charity.
About being a coward. Got it.
It's also about giving to charity. But yes, it's also about winning. And Yubi has some points to make up. So taking a favorite that's going to get him some points is entirely encouraged.
If the team that has, four majors in a row out of the Asia RMR, if they bottom out somehow, I'm going to be pissed. I might just give up on the show, to be honest.
Well, it'll have been a fun, 2 years, 3 years almost after this one. But hey, yeah, maybe picking teams just wasn't for you all along.
Yeah,
The
maybe
way
not.
it's been going.
I just like to talk about him.
True, true. We'll maybe keep you on as a permanent guest, but let's take a look at my picks because I've got
because you're also a numbers guy, King. Before we move on from
Yes.
Mongolz, I just wanted to ask you a question. This is purely self-indulgent because this will help me in my preparation for the RMR.
Go for it.
Do you know if Mongolz will be considered number 5 in the world should they make it to the major? Like, because I know that now we're supposed to be doing seedings off of Valve rankings. So would that technically mean that they're
I believe Thunderpick is outside of the cutoff point for the ranking and seeding.
Got it. Okay, because I was just gonna say if they're seeded number 5, bro, they're making it top 8 at the major.
Yeah, I've not read anything that says there's a reseeding process post RMR because currently everything at the RMRs is done off of the Valve rank from like a couple weeks ago, and I don't believe there's been any mentioning of a reseeding, so they'll just be considered the number 1 seed out of Asia with a prior existing rank of whatever. It'd be ridiculous if they were the 5th team.
I think that the previous major was reseeding-ish, but I'm not sure.
We'll find out. I mean, I'm not sure what that had to do with numbers, but
yeah.
I'm not a rulebook guy.
Number 5, bro.
There is one number involved. You're right. But that does leave me with some interesting options because I can make 2 picks here. I'm making my favorite and my underdog pick. Do I bring them up already? No, I'm going to make an underdog pick, and for me this is going to be a difficult pick to make just because I don't like any of them, and I would probably have taken Talon here. I've watched Rare Atom play in EU now as well, and it wasn't a whole lot more positive than what Talon showed me. So I can't exactly use that as a great basis. I mean, sure, they beat Cybershock 2-1. Well, look at that. Someone can actually do it, unlike Talon. But they also did lose, back-to-back BO3s to Spirit Academy. They lost to Endpoint in OBO3. I watched them play, and whilst you kind of feel for some of the individuals, overall the team just isn't up there. So I'm going to take Alter Ego.
Bro, yours.
I'm taking Alter Ego as my underdog. Just because I know all of these names. I know all of these names from various unconnected teams. They've plucked, as from my experience, just names out of nowhere. But I believe there's enough chaos involved in this roster construction for them to just cheese something. I'm not saying they could definitely make it through. I'm just saying that between these players, there's enough randomness, enough RNG.
You could have gone for Francis Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, but I don't really think there is, because Je ne sais quoi is very specific. You'd understand if you were French.
So specific.
Because I don't think it's that. It's just there's always an outside chance for someone, and that's kind of what you bet on for Talon. I'd rather go all the way. Give me the team that doesn't even have an established seeming playbook, whose biggest win recently was God's Reign in a BO3. There's no tape on these guys. They're the underdogs, the outsiders. This is the team the movie's actually made about. I'm taking Alter Ego as an underdog, and I know it's going to be 1,000,000 to 1, but I don't trust GR. I don't trust Rare Atom, and you took Talon, so yeah.
I'll let you go first, Michael.
Okay. Yeah. See, they just haven't played a lot of games, and I can't confidently say I know who's calling. It probably is Bentet, but
it's Zine.
Oh, is it Zine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, if Zine's calling, then I don't know what the fuck's going on. But then Dobu at least has called and might even take over some of the calling responsibilities. Dobu and Zine have played together before on NKT. I can't remember if Bentet was there with them at the time. I didn't think so.
He was in Talon back then.
Yes, yeah. I don't know. I mean, 8Kit is just kind of farming their games, which is great. Even though they had Waste of Ammo, who is, I know he's like he transitioned to full-time like rifler, but he wasn't that great at it. He's better than his ulping.
Waste has been replaced by Dobu.
Yes, yeah, I know. But so now with Dobu being like a fragging, semi-calling kind of player, I actually think this team actually has maybe more merit than like the games that they've played would indicate. These guys are the most legit like dark horse in the tournament, just because I do think they have enough name power to actually somehow fluke it either in the upper bracket, or I don't know if they have to deal with like a rare atom or a Drillas or something, or a Talon maybe even in the lower bracket. I think there's not an outside chance that they could win those games as well. I just don't think that they have a map pool, from my understanding.
Okay. So I want to rant about alter egos. I'm glad you picked them, T. First of all, Bintet is not a good player anymore, especially if he's not going to be calling. He has been going in and out of organizations randomly. It was Bigatron before this. It was Alter Ego in the middle as well. It's just been different orgs that he's been visiting based off of his past fame and the fact that he's a famous Indonesian player, and a lot of these organizations are based out of Indonesia. That's literally it. He's not a good player anymore. He doesn't play well enough on the top level of Asian Counter-Strike. So Bentet's out for me. Then, you know what? 8kit, he's going to farm. Riflers from EU generally do well when they come to Asia, more so than Operas, funnily enough. So
he's
MHL,
oping, so.
Well, there you go. I don't know anything about this. Then in that case, he's gonna be he's kind of gonna be wrecked by a few of them, though, in my opinion. But I haven't seen enough of him play, so I don't really have much of an opinion on that yet. Freeman is just mediocre. Honestly, Freeman was one of those players who, if he was a fifth player on a good Chinese team, I'd be like, yeah, I don't really mind. That's okay. He feels disciplined. He feels like he's going to know all your util or whatever. There's no one who is a standout player to me. And as someone who absolutely has loved watching Dobu play over the past, God knows how many years it's been now, I am incredibly disappointed about Dobu's decision to join this team for the RMR, both for one reason. I think it should not have been allowed. I think that is absolutely pathetic that it was. And I think that it's one of the many gross sort of overlookings of the loopholes in the rules that have been allowed to be created. The fact that he lost to GR in the finals of a qualifier, like literally the grand finals, and then he just is allowed to be in alter ego as a substitute. That's a joke. Obviously, there are other things. Go ahead.
It also entered their Asia Pacific ECL run as well, because he wasn't allowed to play with them anymore, and they were playing with Flynn.
And that's where it's just like one of those things where when I see Annihilation having left this team or being benched or whatever, when I say this team, sorry, I mean Atox. Before I used to think, oh my God, Annihilation must have done something wrong. Bro, if this is going to be the attitude of your players, if this is going to be the attitude of the guy who's your spiritual leader and your captain, the one player who is so famous in your team and in your country, which is why everyone's flocking to him, I completely understand that. He's inted his team in Atox as well for their chance of making the pro league, like Michael said. He's joining this team that is going to be calling and very uncomfortable, very frankly speaking, English in their callers, because none of these guys... Bintet aside, Zayn is fluent in English in the sense that he will speak it to you, but I don't know if he's fluent to the point where he can call, because that's a different level, right? Then I'm looking out towards Freeman. Again, he speaks English pretty well, but again, I don't actually see a lot of the comms looking clean in this team when it gets into these messy situations versus when you look over towards like a Talon, who are obviously going to be having pretty good comms. GR is going to be having pretty good comms, things like this. So I actually think this is not a team at all. I think this is, frankly, if they make it through to the major, it's a guaranteed 0-3. I don't even have the questions about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Honestly, everyone in the underdog section for this event, should they make it through the major, immediately becomes my 0-3 pick. That's kind of how it is from what I've seen.
That's because you'd be wrong.
Sure, some of us believe in Talon for whatever reason.
No, that's my favorite. That's all my underdog. My underdog is different.
We'll see when we get to that.
You might not be able to pick this underdog. If you're picking two underdogs instead of like one, like a favorite, then it's gonna be cooked. Like we don't have enough picks for that, I don't think. I mean, we do, but
maybe not to be selective is the problem. Yes, and I look at this team as if they're one of those rosters that's basically doing nothing except boot camping for this event, and then trying to make it out. Like, you see their match history, they sign Dobu, and then there's like a month of nothing until they start playing this event.
Yeah, we saw how well that went for Tyloo, didn't it?
Oh, no, I'm not saying I'm guaranteeing a success. It's an attempt. There's a clear idea. It's just, all they give a shit about is this. Sure. They may not go far afterwards. Sorry?
Are you a teacher in real life, KingT?
No.
Okay, because this feels like when you give someone a gold star for getting a 6 out of 10 on their test instead of 4 out of 10. It's still shit, but you're just like, it's okay, good job. Thanks for trying.
Yeah,
you can improve.
I don't need them to do anything further. I'm just taking the points if they make it through. And as I said, I don't believe in any of these other underdogs anyway. My favorite though now, because this is where it gets obvious because why else would I be sitting here talking about favorites if I'm not picking FlyQuest? Seriously. My other option is Drillas, and I was considering it because Lynn Vision again are there, but we'll get to that.
I was going to say Lynn Vision are right there.
But for me, the other option was to go for the guys who are clearly attempting something, but I'm going to lock in on FlyQuest for a second. They are a roster that has in the past infuriated me. When I watch them against European competition, it's been historically a case of nobody individually makes very sound decisions, and the overall game plan and structure isn't really there. With Dexter coming in, it hasn't really changed that much in terms of the overall game plan, but these players have had a lot of time to mature, a lot of games against real teams, and it has gotten better on the individual front. Alistair having a standout event in my eyes was at the Challenger event, my God. Katowice, was it? Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta, yes.
Atlanta,
that they won. And yes, for me, whilst it is always nice to talk about players like Inns, Vexite, the real rifle talent, one of the key determining factors for them is always going to be Alistair's form and, importantly, his decision-making, because that's been the thing that has cost him so many just opportunities, matches, rounds, whatever you want. It's cost him a lot. So to see him have an uptick has been great. And finally, just to harp a little bit on Vexite, because he has been the talent of the region for a little while. It's no longer quite the case just because of his age and the fact that others have come through. You know, your Anetics, Hazards, the guys who are supposed to be the next big talents have come up. I don't think those guys have really reached his level even yet, which is shocking considering in Oceania, they put up numbers like gods sometimes, Netic especially. But when facing even the mildest European resistance, it all goes down the toilet.
Yeah,
and having
throw me
watched
in a kindergarten fighting ring and I'll do it too.
Yeah, and funnily enough, you throw a single flashbang, all of a sudden, Oceanic talent just doesn't know what they're doing. But FlyQuest, tried and tested, they have done it. And Vexite is a player whose numbers pop when you look at things like dynamic and explosive fragging. He's actually incredible. So FlyQuest have the firepower to do this. They have finally some of the maturity and experience to do it. Yes, they failed last time when Dexter had just arrived. I think this is going to be a redemption arc. This is going to be, honestly, a revenge tour. I'll be surprised if they drop a map.
I think the biggest thing for me when they won Atlanta was that, sure, Alistair was having a live tournament, but they were also winning quite... I mean, they're winning quite well without Inns being like the forerunner in not only like finding kills or searching the map or just locking down bomb sites. He actually wasn't needed as heavily as as previous outings we've seen from FlyQuest, which I guess was like a very promising sign. I guess that's kind of part and parcel with if Alistair hits his shots, then maybe Alistair or Inns isn't needed as much. But it was strange to me to see so much of FlyQuest just across the board. Like, you had good rounds from Liaz, you had big rounds from Dexter, Vexite, and then obviously Alistair was the highlight. And then, you know, Inns was there. I mean, he existed. He was always there as backup, but he was very infrequently needed. So those are massive positives for me coming into the major cycle, because if even like 50% of that Alistair shows up for the RMRs, FlyQuest will easily lock this in. I have actually no doubts that I think their calling is a lot better than some of the previous events. Like, they reset, they set up for bomb site hits. They weren't doing that before. We'd just be like, oh, I'm on an extremity, let me lurk. And instead, now they are actually going for side hits. And that was the worst Australian accent in the world. I'm aware.
It was perfect. It's perfect. You nailed every last guttural sound.
After all the butchering of language we've done, you finally participate. I'm so happy that it's happened.
And in a language you're so fluent in as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So they are doing stuff better now. I actually don't have any qualms with this team.
Okay, so let's look at, first of all, what Alistair has done different. He's still missing shots. That's not changed. Even at Atlanta, he was missing shots. But he has something to do in the first 20 seconds of the round, and he asks for a play to be made around him. He asks for cover if need be, or even if he's not asking for cover, someone is providing it to him. That's the big adjustment that they made from Atlanta and before it, in my opinion. And afterwards, when he has a better flowchart in his mind for the beginning of it, Alistair is a very emotionally driven player, in my opinion. And it feels like he's doing a good job of those late rounds as well, when he's not feeling lost all throughout, right? So I think that's been a big level up. Thing is, you just also pointed out, Michael, that Vexite's having good matches, Liaz is having good matches, Dexter, obviously you didn't mention it, but Dexter was having good matches as well.
I mean, he was like the MVP of the tournament, probably. So.
Yeah, so my issue is that whenever I see a team win a tournament like that with basically all 5 players showing up, and Inns maybe could have been better, but he was still pretty good. I don't think that's replicable, and I still think FlyQuest will make it forward because there's 3 seeds over here, and honestly, they should probably be the second one regardless. But this is a team where I think KingT, you are. Like, I'm not letting you get away with what you're saying about Vexite. I fully disagree with you over here. I think you are right in the sense that he is better than his rival Australian Talon. There's no doubt about that. He's definitely one of the talents coming out of Australia, but I don't think he's been that impressive. I think in a lot of his matches versus European opposition, he looks very lost, and maybe some of that has changed in Atlanta, and I agree with that because of the resetting points and everything. But I actually think a lot of that has come from Alistair himself and how players are being forced to play around him. I don't think Vexite has shown himself off in a very good way in the Dexter system, in the in system where he should have had more freedom. I think Vexite is a liability for this team. And Liaz is just, quite frankly, not very good either. But Dexter is a liability in the sense that I will never rely on him to be there. If he shows up, that's fantastic. I don't think he's going to absolutely shit the bed in most situations. Like, I don't expect him to have a 0.8 rating in most of these places, but I think against top opposition, very often I'm going to see Vexite maybe middling around, having a couple of rounds where he has multi-kills, but then a lot of rounds where I'm thinking, okay, what are you doing? So I am going to push back on that a fair bit. That being said, though, for me, it does just come down to Inns. This team will always be Inns and Dexter's firepower to me. Dexter obviously does bring a lot of individual mechanics at the very least, even if I think his calling can be suspect at times. Firepower-wise, these guys should just outshoot anyone on the server.
I mean, do you want to respond to that, T, first, or?
Well, I don't disagree, actually, with a lot of Vexite in terms of versus top competition. You are entirely right. When I watch him at like a Pro League event, typically, historically, I do feel like I'm watching a player who's out of his midst. Thankfully, I'm not watching Pro League this time. I'm not previewing Pro League. I'm previewing the Shanghai Major, Asia RMR, where he doesn't have to face top talent. He doesn't have to face top teams. He has to face this group. And yes, I agree that there's some things that need to be still improved in his game in terms of where he fits in a system. But I don't doubt actually what he can do with a mouse. And that's what's going to really come through it. I think he is more mechanically adept than his actual ratings, his fragging numbers often portray, and especially against European competition. But in this event, I don't need him to face European competition. I just need him to help a team steamroll vastly inferior teams. So I'm not too
No, I mean, I fully agree with you, but I just don't want him to be put into the same lens as, some of the actual talents out of the Asia region, like what we're seeing on the Mongolz. And if Atox had made it there, maybe some of the people on Atox where I know they can probably frag pretty well with the Europeans. I don't think Vexite is in that slot.
I do agree that Vexite didn't look great in Inz's system, but I think it's unfair to say that, he's a liability within Dexter's system. I don't believe that at all. The role, I mean, he's not being given as much autonomy in this version of FlyQuest. He is playing more with the pack, and previously it would be like Inns, hunt for opening kills, see if you can find a way to win the round, and then Vexite, you're left in a clutch. I don't think that's where he's the most comfortable. And I think they've changed it so that he gets in those situations less. Like, I think they'll want someone like Liaz, hell, even Alistair in some of those late round situations more. Even Dexter, if they can somehow salvage that. And you know that Inns can close rounds. So I don't think Vexite should be that guy, but it does also lead to that point where, yeah, when we think about a lot of teams and their development cycles, we shouldn't be looking at the in-game leader as being like a heavy hitting player in those squads. Like Blitz is one for the Mongolz. Big Uzera is another. But we really shouldn't be looking at in-game leaders to take over. And I do agree that if you subtract Dexter, you have Alistair and Inns in theory. And then I don't know whether it's Vexite or Liaz that's supposed to be that sort of third star. That's my big concern. But again, don't have to worry about that until they get to the major. So
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and they won't be in the favorite slots when we do finally get there if they as I predict, qualify.
Well, they won't get 0-3 though.
Ooh,
Fuck your pick'ems.
yeah, less likely, but that's
That's
I think
reserved
that's
for
enough.
North America. We know
That's
that.
enough Australian talk, I think, for now. Let's get back into the real Asia picks. Yumi, you've got an underdog to take. You've got two choices. I know which one I'm not going to guess for you, but I think I know which one you've got in mind, because one of these is not like the other.
Yeah. Grr Gaming. GR.
You're picking them? Damn it. Oh, that was mine.
See, I knew it would probably be yours as well.
You're
And that's what I
awful.
mean. You can't pick the underdog, and then you just won't have options. Like,
oh, now I feel bad. I hate the show. I'm leaving.
Yes, finally a walkout. We can get to the top of Reddit. Let's do it.
we warned you. We warned you, but would you listen? No. I think the good news is that when it came to qualifying for this RMR, they were boot camping, which is sick. Which I didn't even know about until I think TeaTime, you might have told me about it while we were covering it. But they were boot camping. They usually play on like high ping, playing the Asia servers, and sometimes you'll look at these players, they'll rip heads off, and then the next round it's like, why these guys aren't reacting? They're not even looking at their monitors, and some of that will probably just be ping at play, and especially CS2 and the interaction with that. But when they were boot camping, all on like stable ping, closer to servers, they were sick. They were actually just It was surprising to see how consistent they were mechanically, and for them, this is just like a massive opportunity. This is a team that's been growing in the Asia region for, albeit one tiny step at a time for the past like 3 years. And I actually think they're like a weird dark horse where, yeah, they could take another tiny step up. And I don't know that they can. I would confidently put them in that third place slot for this RMR, but they will probably cause an upset. Like they might, they could beat a FlyQuest on a good day. I think they actually could rock ahead if they end up in the lower bracket against one of the favorite teams, and people will be very, very surprised, I think.
I'm fully with Michael on this one because obviously I wanted to pick them. So GR is a lot better than people understand, because you have to remember that Asia is a very complicated region for servers, right? GR is an Eastern Russian team. Which is why I'm only qualifying this because I saw some HLTV comments, and I know I should never do that, but just being like, oh, why are they allowed to play in Asia, whatever. East Russia can only play Asia, right? But even when they're playing Asia, they're literally on Hong Kong and Singapore, they're getting like 90 to 110 ping. It is impossible to play on the level that they are consistently playing. They still make top sixes in ECL very consistently, even from that. They boot camp for this, and they're also boot camping, I believe, in St. Petersburg as well, or one of the Russian cities where you can play Europe in preparation for the RMR as well. And for this organization as well, I mean, that's the most amount of money that they've ever put into it. It's a very small organization run from it's a small Hong Kong based organization too, and they're really putting everything. Go ahead.
I think they boot camped in September, so I think it's been a little bit of time maybe since their boot camp.
I think they're boot camping again.
Okay.
I will confirm this as well. But I'm fairly sure that it was mentioned to me that they plan to boot camp again.
Okay.
I don't know if they went through with that, but they definitely planned it. So I am looking for the September boot camp was in China, Michael. That's why.
But they played a CCTEU in mid-September.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting confused. They also never mind. Point is, generally speaking, I think this team also has a huge upgrade when they're going to go on to LAN, because personally, I think that their Opera mediocrity, is it Wecht or mediocrity? It's Wecht,
I think it's Wecht.
Yeah. Wecht is terrible online. Like you can see Wecht, just people just go by and it's like, he's just been one tap. He is a non-factor on the server, and despite that, they're always looking so good versus some of these opposition. They always have one map, normally it's Mirage, that they can take a big win out, even against like a Mongolz. I know we've seen them get a couple of those upsets as well. This is a team that I actually think will upset FlyQuest in the semifinals should they make it there. So yeah, I agree. I actually think they could even make it out of this RMR at number 2 theoretically. So yeah, it should be a fun time for them. This is actually a very, very exciting team.
I think what's interesting is that Salomux, I think he's calling still on this team.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he's very active. Like he moves around the map a lot. I think what's crazy watching him play Asia Counter-Strike is that sometimes it's a little turbulent. Like you're not even sure watching it from like a top down where the enemy team is headed, and he'll still pick the right bomb site kind of before they've made up their mind. He makes a lot of like good forecasty type calls, and he gets some like very big multi kills in late rounds because of it. So I think this team is going to come in as a very much an unknown quantity for a lot of people, but these guys hit hard and they're very explosive.
And the very nice thing is, it's not just Salamox. A lot of these guys have like a really good player identity, right? So you're going to look out towards Mediocrity, very hard lurker, right? It knows his timings very well, knows that he'll be willing to take a 1v1 versus the anchor player on big sites very often, will call for those extra flashes, right? So because they've been playing online in a way which has forced them to have a weird structure, I think weird structures actually do really well for teams when they're trying to play up against, quote unquote, top tier regional opposition. So yeah, I think GR is a very exciting underdog pick.
Yeah, as you can tell by the fact that these two have pretty much fought each other for the right to pick them, and that I just outright dismissed them. I've never watched a goddamn second of this team play. Honestly, I could have maybe catched them losing to WW or Eyeballers when they came to EU for that CCT close qualifier. But there's only so much Counter-Strike a man can watch in a day. And September is prime Counter-Strike territory, so they weren't top of my list. Look, the run they made to get here, beating Atox 2-1, is somewhat notable. I mean, I know Atox's roster fairly well. I know some of these players. I mean, this is not a nothing win. This Atox team is talented. So perhaps there is a lot of credence here. I just, having never seen them play really, I couldn't really give them that sort of credit. It'll be interesting to see if their playstyles that you've described actually are so overt and so visible, so to even someone like me watching them for the first time, because that'll be really fun. I mean, the last time we had a team with such explicit, rigid, like stylistic differences to the rest of the scene come up, it was out of Russia, and well, Russia and the CIS block under Jame. And sure, it eventually ran its course and kind of felt like it fizzled out, but goddamn, did it get him a long way, right? So perhaps this team with their own idiosyncrasies will be equally interesting, and hopefully for your sakes, Yumi, equally as performant. But I just never seen them play.
Just to touch on it, because I know when people look at them initially, they'll just be like, this team's like very puggy, and I think it's just because they're very confident that people can make plays. I think that's maybe the one thing that might hold them back, is that maybe people will be too active. Like I think this is a team with a lot of individual ideas that will be facilitated by the team. It's not just, hey, I'm just gonna walk through a smoke, or I'm just gonna walk through on a timing. They will try and facilitate. Like if I think I can take a fight from Palace or Mirage or something, they will try and throw interference on Con and drag the extra A bomb site defender. They do try and build off an idea. I think the biggest hurdle for them will maybe just be culminating those ideas and just picking one to actually start, instead of, we'll do this and then we'll do your thing and then we'll do this, and then it's like one interruption in the chain and the whole thing breaks down. So I think that's, when people look at this team, they may just think they're just coming out and shooting these people in the head, but
that's hard.
there are a couple of layers to it, I think.
Yeah, that is hard to do with any consistency. I'm looking forward to it, actually. I'll try to stick around for their games. Hopefully they can take that upset against Rare Atom, which I guess bookies-wise would be an upset. Clearly, you guys not too in love with Rare Atom. So, TeaTime, you have one more pick. Is this about to be the Rare Atom pick to fill out your roster?
It is a Rare Atom pick because I have to go for it. No, I'm lying to you. Of course I wanted to pick Rare Atom over here. That's what I wanted all along. Don't let that previous segment
You can still pick a favorite.
Guys.
Like
you can still pick a real favorite. You can pick Lynn Vision, Drillers. No?
Brother, you think Lynn Vision is... If you think Lynn Vision is favored over Rare Atom, there's no way.
I think it's the finals of ECL, bro.
I know, but I don't... I wish they hadn't.
But I don't want them. I don't want them.
I don't want them. I'm not buying... I'm sorry. I saw what happened between Lynn Vision and Tai Lu. Okay, man. I am not buying that 0-3. What, they got a total of 9 rounds in the best of 5, and I know that's kind of cheating because one of them was a default win, but 9 rounds in the best of 5. So yeah, I'm not picking Lynn Vision. Rare Atom are fun. Rare Atom are actually genuinely really fun because somehow we've taken Kaze out of Advent's suffocating system, and I'm saying suffocating, not bad. I think Advent was maligned a little bit, and we've seen Kaze become this weird amalgamation of what Dan King was once upon a time and what he himself was before. Because now he's playing out with Summer and somebody, and it feels like they are just the demons on either side of his shoulder, just egging him on. Like, yeah, you can go for that repeat. Yeah, bro, you're better than them. You're better. Just repeat him. Just peak again. And Kaze sometimes does actually hit the stride, which I haven't seen from him before, at least before, for a long time. So I'm looking forward to that. Beyond that, I'll tell you what's good about this team. Child King and Li Hang are legit. Like, they are actually mechanically really good prospects coming out of China. And anyone who'd been watching the Chinese region for a while knew that these guys would be on the come up, and they realistically should have been sort of the next iteration of what maybe Mercury and Mosaic were. Mercury and Mosaic had the chance of being molded by an IGL like Advent. Child King and Li Hang have not. So what you still have is sort of some classical Chinese style of Counter-Strike where they are playing very puggy, they are playing very multi-kill reliant, and they can get away with it. The problem is Summer and somebody are not the players they used to be, but they also are, right? This is the weird thing about them. They're fulfilling a real veteran role in the sense that they don't care about who's in front of them at all. They will go for these weird pushes, they will go for these wild plays, but I will add that maybe they should care about who's in front of them sometimes, because those hands aren't what they used to be once upon a time.
It's some old Tai Lu energy, just the full disrespect.
Yeah, it is some old Tai Lu energy for sure, but it's also like Tai Lu energy from before anyone was really good at using Molotovs, right? So that's what it feels like sometimes. So the good thing is that they are also then making the ultimate LAN X factor, because what you have to remember is a lot of these players are going to come to LAN and they will crumble, right? Outside, when you're looking over the overall RMR, GR, these guys, they could very much end up turtling, right? When we're talking about teams with a unique identity, very often one of the first things that you shed when you are quote unquote choking on LAN is that identity itself. You're trying to be like, oh guys, we got to get it together. You're not making as many plays. You're getting more worried. You're watching out for pushes that could be coming because you had one round where Summer or somebody pushed forward and got a multi-kill, right? And at the same time, you can't really break into a bomb site because Child King or Li Hang is there. So this is a very interesting upset caliber team. And the good thing about them is that none of these guys are afraid of being on LAN. And when I compare that to Alter Ego, sure, they've got veterans. I don't think these veterans have been on the server on a relevant level in a very long time in a LAN setting. GR is obviously completely new to it. Lynn Vision, I just pointed out, I don't know what's going on with them. Honestly, other than Zacher and Westmelon, I don't really like anyone on that team. FlyQuest, I think, are incredibly shaky at times. And I think FlyQuest on the head-to-head on the Opera, this is one of the places where I think Kaze could be better than Alistair. I think Child King and Li Hang could theoretically be better than maybe a Vexite Inns combination. So yes, they are underdogs for sure, but I actually think that they can run away with this one overall. Even Drillas, man, like I just want Drillas to lose, I'll be honest. But even Drillas, I think other than Haji, who are you really looking at and saying, Haji and Waro, who are you really looking and saying, yeah, these guys can't be destroyed by some really weird Chinese Counter-Strike where you don't understand whatever is going on. So yeah, Rare Atom, I could see it happening.
Vem's
kind of monstrous, but whatever. Yeah. We'll ignore that oversight and focus on Rare Atom.
I mean, Scenario, you could also point out Scenario if you want, because he's a part of this lineup now.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, there are some weaknesses Drillers, but let's talk about Rare Atom, because for me, I mean, I've not picked them just because again, they came to EU. I watched a couple of these games just offhand, and I'm like, this isn't really that impressive to me. I guess for me, that's the problem. If I've compared them to a standard, again, they're not actually having to face here. I mean, Spirit Academy play proper together European Counter-Strike. They are tier 2, but there's talent all the way through that roster. But then, yeah, losing to Endpoint. It's difficult, to really keep my chin up about a team after I see Azuwu absolutely dominate them, considering what he's been like as a prospect. He was supposed to be the next British player that you're supposed to know. The fact that no one's heard of him yet kind of says enough, right? Like, it's pretty
easy.
Endpoint,
though, I think.
Yeah.
When Endpoint have a talent, you eventually hear about them because they've got good structure, leadership. Yeah, but clearly I think also Azuwu just isn't that talent. So the fact that he's able to stomp them, I kind of lost a little bit of faith.
Sure.
I'm sure you have more in-depth analysis about this, but that's all I'm going to say about it. Is that for me, they're one of those Asian teams where it's like, if they get you off guard, if they catch you off, they might be able to convert with the right multi-kills. I just don't see it.
I think it is. I think it is too contingent on Kaze actually having that sort of carefree, like dynamic play style that has actually just not been a part of his repertoire for the majority of his career underneath Advent. Because on the run up and actually qualifying to this tournament, yeah, he was that guy. Like he took fights, like he beat his old teammates to qualify to the RMRs, and for him, that's a bit of a grudge match. He didn't even have the same chip on his shoulder in that game, which I think was a little concerning to me. He still went for fights, but it was far more sporadic than when he was against lesser teams. I think they may see themselves as too much of an underdog. I do agree they have the experience that, and they definitely have the firepower and the players to do it. But I thought this would be a team that looked better in a structure. And instead, it's almost like full rain. Summer somebody, you can do some crazy thing. Child King, go and make a play. And it's just too sporadic, too unpredictable for me in that sense. I thought this team would have a bit more straight edge leadership, but it's too on the fly for me to feel confident in them at all.
And that does kind of describe essentially what I had in my head of the sort of the chaotic Chinese team. Like, they're going to throw some shit at you. They might have some talented players, but overall, what are we talking about? Like, when it comes down to it, it's a bit ugly. It might be enough to get them through, because I'm about to talk about one of these other teams we haven't picked. There's two left.
Yeah, we have to talk about them.
Let's start with Lynn Vision. We'll keep the most controversial for the end. Why is it, TeaTime, define exactly what it is that you think Rare Atom has that Lynn Vision doesn't? You said you see Westmel and Zaka, you don't really get the rest of the team. What's it been like for them recently? Because they come into this event quite high ranked relative to the event. So I'm wondering what's been up with that.
Listen, dude, I just can't put up with whatever's been going on with like Emilia, Afufu, and Flying. I think all of these guys are just become so mid. Emilia always has these moments, there are always these flashes, but I feel like he's just a bad Vexite. Right, like that's the way I characterize Vexite, in the sense that I'm saying, hey, sometimes he looks lost. Emilia has his maps, and even there, this is very clearly a team that has one pillar and only one. It's Zacher. Zacher is the by far best player on this team, be it on rifles, be it on an AWP. You can give him whatever you want, and he is the only one where I look at him like, I feel bad for him. Westmelon, I kind of do, but also it feels like Westmelon's like short stint as being this fragging IGL has run out, because he had, and obviously I think Torrin coined this phrase a very long time ago, the IGL hangover that was helping him out, where X-Pro was originally the leader for this team. They had a lot of the experienced coaching staff as well. I think Vadim was adding a lot to the team overall as a coach as well. So when those two left and they became this Westmelon combo, initially it felt like, oh my God, Westmelon's still doing so well despite being an IGL. That's not worn off. I actually don't think his IGLing is particularly good anymore. I think this team hasn't really been able to adapt to having new players added to the extent that they have. And yes, they're highly ranked, but I think a lot of that is just a leftover from a bygone era, pretty much. This is not a team that I'm excited about at all. And frankly speaking, the only reason why they're going to be in Pro League is because Atox is a mess, and they decided that they didn't want to play for a Pro League qualifier, and that they're going to let Dobu play in, a team that's going to do fuck all because it has been Tet in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how they've restructured the team, because I would have thought this team could actually do quite well. I think the Flying Afufu thing, I do agree, is just kind of like, what are these people even doing on the roster?
Yep.
I will push back. I think Emilia is fine. He's grown a lot as a player. He's definitely a good extremities type player, but I would assume, based on the fact that they've had to like change, or they've had to make these roster moves, that Emilia is actually playing with the pack. I've not watched tons of Lynn Vision, unfortunately, because I'd kind of given up on the team. But I have seen what Zacher's being able to produce, and to me, that's nice. I like that he's back to AWPing, because I always did wonder why he had to give it up. I understand G was maybe a slightly better at sort of like positional AWPing, but Zacher has always had like a much better X factor to him. And yeah, I do agree. I feel bad that, to be honest, him and Westmelon are, I think, wasting away on this team. I think Westmelon, if he's not in-game leading, put into a different system, he's actually an exceptional lurker. and just great mid-round player. So both him and Zacher, I think, deserve better. But that's on Lynn Vision, man. They get all this money from making it from the RMRs last time, and this is what you're able to get flying in a Fufu. I just don't believe that. And and they sold G, and they sold Starry, or were they out of contract? Because
I mean, you never know with Chinese teams, to be fair.
yeah, that's fair. It's just like they get all this money, and this is what you're able to produce. I just don't believe in it. Like these guys they're not prospects. They're kind of nothing pieces to me.
Yeah, that was something I was about to bring up, was the Starry point, because I remember Starry being hyper talented, and the fact he ends up on Tyloo, someone who doesn't really know the Chinese scene, is like, oh, the big dogs buy him out. But if you're intimating maybe there's Lynn Vision are willing to let him go, I'm not really sure what their vision is for their roster at that point.
I mean, listen, I'll be honest. Starry was a weird player because he performed pretty well in international tournaments, but funnily enough, he was kind of ass domestically a lot of the time. It was a very it's one of those players where I say, you know what, if you can get a good buyout for him, and you then go for it. But then you have to find the next talent. It can't be Flying, who was on Wings Up and IG before that, who is a completely known quantity. You had to be in the conversations with Lee Hang and Child King, right? You had to be trying to get those big up and coming riflers coming out. Or alternatively, you could have been in conversation with Tyloo to maybe, mine out, steal one of their players or something. I just generally think this was a team that they locked into the lineup, and when they started becoming good, when they started elevating, they never looked like they were going to be able to actually pivot into a better team overall once they lost those few pieces, right? Once you let go of G, once you let go of Starry, they just couldn't find the next pieces. They couldn't compete for it. I don't know if it's financial. I don't know what it is. Maybe they don't want to spend the money, right? Like, very frankly, that's also the other thing. Maybe they're saying, hey, we've made our money. We don't want to dish out 150K to 250K for buyouts, because that is probably how much things cost in the Chinese region. And we're going to try and just see if we can, min-max it with these quote-unquote top tier 2 players and flying in a Fufu. But yeah.
Well, it's like before making it to the major, Lynn Vision were like always bridesmaid, never the bride, always second place, qualifying to lands. Oh, we missed out again. And then they finally have the breakthrough, and it's like, oh, maybe this is some return on investment for all the years that we put into Westmelon and this whole team, and we're sending them off. They're going to Pro League, and they're kind of bombing out, and it's not too great. Yeah, maybe this is them getting some reparations for the amount of investment that they've, I guess, put into the team and not seen, I guess, dramatic rewards for.
But it will always be disappointing that Westman and Zacher are wasting away on this team, like you said, Michael, right? Like you would imagine a rare Adam with Zacher on it, as well as Westmal, and even I could see those two replacing Summer and somebody if you wanted to. I mean, sure, maybe you keep one of them, but the point is Zacher especially, I would have a place on that lineup, even if you wanted to potentially get rid of Kaze. There's so much that could have been done, in my opinion, in the Asian region that unfortunately hasn't been, which, whatever. But yeah, Lynn Vision is a bit of a nothing burger to me.
Okay, interesting, because I don't really have that sort of insight. I just knew that from the little I'd seen them play. Yeah, I agreed on the Fufu point, especially that who on earth is this lad? Can he play Counter-Strike? Because it didn't really seem yes was the answer to that last question. So a bit questionable on the recruitment side. I think we have to talk about them now. We've delayed them. No one's picked them. Everyone's favorite
The fan
Asian
favorites,
team.
maybe
A certain fans. I mean, the last time we had a show where this team was mentioned, it did perform fairly well. Although pretty controversially, because we did spend most of that episode talking about them being scumbags. All right, Drillas. Just before we get into the actual conversation, I put so much time, all of like 3 minutes, making the logo I was going to use for them. So I'm just going to put it on screen right now. I'm very proud of my European drill. So there it is, right in the top left. Drillas.
That's awful.
They have ruffled some feathers.
For context, by the way, guys, I can't actually see it, but I'm assuming it's awful. It is awful. KingT is terrible.
It's a beauty. It's the kind of drill that Europe would love to bring to this event. And Drillas have. Clearly, with this roster that now sits not even majority Asian, with a dubious flag thrown in, as it did before, as we all know. Haji, dual citizen with it's Morocco, right? Yeah, yep. I wasn't sure which one of the French-speaking North African countries it was, but he is actually a viable Asia participant. It just felt a bit off. And then when they do qualify, we get this change to make them now just outright European majority. It reeks. It smells so bad. It just doesn't feel good at all. And TeaTime, I know you have a lot of thoughts, and I'm going to let you go. Just express to me what this feels like.
Let me make it worse for you. This is the issue. It's worse than people understand because it's double standards on rulings. If you look out towards the Akimbo lineup, right? The Akimbo lineup was invited into the North American RMR closed qualifiers based on their performance within North America. It is fully Mongolian.
Yep.
Why were they allowed to play North America? Because, well, you know what? We live here. I don't know if they're students, whatever their situation is. We always play North America. We are North American for the purposes of qualifier. Can we please play here? If that's going to be your logic, then I have two questions. Number one, how the hell is Haji allowed to play in Asia if you're going to be saying that players are going to be allowed to play now based predominantly off of their regionality and where they're playing? Number two, if that is going to be the extension, then what are the issues that dude, that's actually sick.
It's actually very good. Yeah,
bro,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
legit.
You
Never
flamed
mind.
it without seeing it, and now
back.
we've seen the logo,
I
and
take
it's
it
actually
all
pretty
back.
good.
That's so good. Wow. Never mind. Okay. I apologize to KingT and his family. But
I didn't realize they were involved, to be honest. But
I don't know. I don't know who
They
you
told you
reached out to
everything
now.
about graphics design.
So the other issue that, for context to anyone who's watching, because no one cares about the Middle Eastern slut in the RMR except for me, because my friends play in it and I coached a team in it. There's been this issue for a long time that Israeli players and Levant region players only ever play in Asia when it's time for the Middle Eastern RMR, because initially they couldn't play Europe, but now I think they're actually allowed to as well. Because they play in European servers all year long, and they're never in any of the Asian servers. They're never in any of the Middle Eastern tournaments unless they're major qualifiers. And there are quite a few Middle Eastern tournaments, actually, funnily enough, so you'd be able to tell. So this is effectively a full team that has been taken from the European region, including the Israeli players, on the basis of the Valve ruling that Akimbo is a North American team. Right, so it gets even worse on that end. And of course, there are counter examples to this if you go back further in time. Because if you go back further in time, you think about Renegades, right? Renegades always had to go back to Asia to play the minor. That's fine. Team 1, right? And I think that's okay. I think that was wrong as well. I think that Renegades should have played the North American qualifier if they wanted to play the North American qualifier on the basis of residency, etc., etc. That's okay. But then when you add all of these sort of weird variables in, on top of it, you replace one of your quote-unquote Asian region players with Seneri. This is ridiculous. I mean, the Dobu thing was absurd on itself, but Seneri being added to this team, making it literally 4 players who are European. I don't care if Haji has a dual nationality. He's been playing in Europe all of his life. Based on, again, Valve's most recent regional allocation rules, he should be playing in Europe in that case. So you have 4 European players and 1 Israeli player who also plays on the European server coming into the Asian region and playing this. The RMRs are already a joke because you don't have more qualifier spots for East Asia, which is the most competitive region, and there is no reason to differentiate between Southeast Asia and East Asia based off of servers other than to let Indian teams play, who funnily enough can also play in the Middle Eastern servers as well. So there's a bit of a weird thing on that end. The Asian RMR is the most mismanaged RMR historically, and somehow, right as the point where we're coming to close out RMRs once and for all, Valve has made it so this is the worst one ever, courtesy of Drillas. Great job, guys.
It's also, you know, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of, oh, you know, I want to make a team. I want to make a team that actually can maybe go to a major. Oh, there's no European Open qualifiers, so let's assemble this ragtag group of people that they can make use of the Asia Open qualifiers instead. And but we don't even really like a lot of these Asian players. God, see who can scramble together. Meztol did good at last Asia RMR. Let's bring him in. Amsalam, you know, is a pretty decent Israeli player from the region as well. Yeah, we'll bring these guys in. And okay, yeah, we have personal differences. It's not sickness. It's not a lack of being able to get a visa. We have personal differences to the direction of the team, and so we're deciding to use a substitute that is not from the Middle Eastern region. I don't know, man. It's very exploitative. It spits in the face of what I think the RMRs are supposed to stand for. And when it comes to watching them at the Asia RMR, which we'll get to do firsthand, to be honest, I do hope that they lose quite handily. But also, if they make it, fine. Game is game. I can't actually disrespect that too much. You're making use of exploits in the system, and if they are there, I can't hate you for that. It is instead the system that needs to be changed. I might have a word or two about, you're already towing the line already, being like, oh, Haji, have you looked in your storeroom? Oh, I think you might have. What is that? A Moroccan passport? Yes,
What?
we're in. I already think some of that is already towing the line. And then you do this, it's like, okay, we're not even towing anymore. There is no line, I guess. So, I do agree. It is the Asia RMRs are maybe, I guess, mismanaged. I think a lot of that is some umming and ahhing about servers and routing and which regions should be locked to which servers and blah blah blah. And I know you know more about that than I do, TeaTime. But I don't think it's been terribly mismanaged in terms of always getting Asia representation into an international tournament. That has been the objective from the start, and now we may have the most EU Asia representative that we've ever seen. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make any sense.
It's just funny to me to imagine that, like the Haji randomly hears like the Moroccan national anthem coming out of his closet and he walks in to find his long lost passport. Just, yeah, no. Also, just to add to that, here's the thing. Michael, you're right that the RMR very often do give us the quote unquote best Asian representatives. But Valve themselves made the minors and the RMRs about more than that. They made it about, hey, we want these regions within this overarching, tier 2 region, tier 3 region to be able to come together and actually play on LAN, be able to get this experience, yada, yada, yada. If that wasn't the objective, that would have been fine. But if that's been your messaging all across, if that's been what you've been trying to do all across, then I go back to the same point. We have a European team coming in to play at the Asian RMR, but we don't have a second Mongolian team. The Mongolz are number 5 in Valve's world rankings. We can't have a second Mongolian team? We can't have Atox come into play because they lost to GR 2-1? Really? In the meanwhile, by the way, we've also got Alter Ego, where everyone, because Reddit and Twitter are all hyper-Westernized, they don't understand that Southeast Asia and East Asia are not that different in things like service selection, etc. Also, Southeast Asia is ass. Like, Southeast Asia hasn't been good since 2017, 2018, and I hurt saying that. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we had our Lucid Dreams. I wish we had our Boot Dreams case. I wish we had these incredible teams that could have been fantastic talents that were at the time better than their Mongolian counterparts, but we don't. So if you're going to have regional allocation, do away with that. They can play the East Asian RMR. Hell, I'd be okay with doing away with the Middle Eastern RMR as well if you want to. In my opinion, that should be done after Southeast Asia, because at the very least, Middle East serves literally half of the world. It's already ridiculous. The Middle East has to service South Africa, North Africa, the Levant region, the GCC region coming into it. And if a Kazakhstani player wants to play, they can actually, I have checked this, they can actually put in, Central Asian players can also put in an application if they can show that their ping to Dubai is better than their ping to Frankfurt, to be able to play within the Middle Eastern RMR, right? So this is obviously a region that is potentially covering a ridiculous amount of landmass. Then you have Europe coming in and taking over it.
And the worst thing we have to deal with is like, oh my god, I have 40 ping into the server. I have 50 ping, and these guys are like living on the server. It's
plus South African teams literally fly to Dubai to play. Like, I don't think people understand what an investment that is. They have to fly to Dubai to play the open qualifiers of an RMR. We have teams with, like, we have Pakistan.
Drillas as well, also boot camped in, I think, Dubai. I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they didn't have to. They could have just boot camped in Europe.
Well, yeah.
But my point is,
they did it for the Asia RMRs. Is the thing. Like, yeah.
But my point is that for what the Middle Eastern RMR is supposed to be as well, right? This is a bigger discussion than just the Asian RMR. I think it's important to look at what the Middle Eastern RMR is and how these teams shape out. Middle Eastern teams all fly into Dubai to be able to play, because we've now done away with the system of, oh, you know what happened? Sorry, for context, what used to happen before is you play one map on Europe, you played one map on Dubai, and then the last map would be half and half. It was weird. It was fucked up. It was weird. So you're now spitting in the face of all of these teams whose only opportunity at access to a global circuit is this one RMR that you're now not only have you sort of, finagled the team through, you're replacing one of them with a European. And guess what the worst part of this? The worst part of this is, you know what could have solved all of this if you just put a fucking Asian player in? Or more specifically Middle Eastern would have been better.
Or replaced one of your EU representatives with an EU like if you're talking about like competing regions scenario for another one of the EU applicants, or like KVM or Waro, or that actually holds a fair amount of legitimacy. Instead it's, oh, Amsterdam, you actually did very good in the qualifiers, but in the final you were a little iffy, and now we've decided to take the team in another direction. Goodbye, and hello, Scenery. And this is the thing, Scenery is not a terrible player. Obviously, they had him in the wings as a substitute, just in case something did happen. But it also does feel a little premeditated, perhaps, which is, again, I can't hate the player for playing the game.
No, I mean, listen, fair credit out to Drillas. They're exploiting a system that has been put in place, and there are loopholes in that system to be exploited. Do I think you are an asshole for exploiting the system? Yes, in the same way where I think if Apple dodges taxes, that is fair game, but it's also kind of an asshole move to do, right? So yeah, Drillas, you are kind of assholes, but it is not your fault that the system is enabling you to your anal dispositions.
That is the line of the show, I have to say. And no, to add on just a brief touch on the Counter-Strike point, there are players here who I was mega disappointed that they end up doing this, rather than actually taking the challenge of Tier 2. The fact that currently the Ukrainian scene is about as rich with young talents as any has ever been in the history of Counter-Strike. I'm talking back to like early 2000s Sweden. Like, it's about that rich of players you can just pick out from and take a risk on. The fact that Waro 2K and KVM aren't trying to build something there is mega disappointing to me. Like, you could have been mentoring young players, in Waro's case especially. KVM is also fairly young, fairly under-seasoned, let's say. But Waro 2K, he could have been helping these teams. He could have been, giving up the AWP to be a rifling IGL on a team like a Passion UA. They have found success with Fear, but that's just one example of many. You've got Favbet, LNG, who are one of the more unknown sort of quantities in that region. You also have this bait roster.
Passion UA.
Yeah, Passion UA. I did start there.
Sorry, I misheard you.
Yeah, there are a lot of young up-and-coming Ukrainians. The fact that these guys chose essentially a free run at sticker money, that's essentially what it was. It was like, we know this money's going to be huge. Let's take a stab at it.
And listen, they weren't the only team to do that. Like, the Middle Eastern qualifier was actually just like
rife with it.
Just like, two free agent EU players that want to try and weasel their way into the RMR. Like, we could have been talking about any one of those teams had they actually made it deep. And one of them, I think Onyx Ravens, what they had Sixer and Piton, they were almost here. So we would have been maybe even saying the same things, but they probably also wouldn't have tipped over the line of actually let's bring in a third EU person.
Here's the thing: I don't care if there's 2 imports.
Yeah,
right. Like, look at Liquid. Liquid have 3 imports.
It also, if you're talking about development within the region, if the Middle East is going to have a lot of these players actually intermingle with some domestic talent, that actually will level up the scene slowly. Like, those guys will understand and gain experience from those interactions. It's why we always talk about academy player goes into team and maybe he's maybe overwhelmed by these things, but then he goes back to a tier 2 team and he's actually kind of way better than them now because he understands the game at a deeper level, or he understands how he should be thinking about the game as well.
But enough about NPL, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting case to make, but Lord almighty, I don't think anyone's bringing in Kyojin to find out how to play tier 1 CS. Let's put it that way.
Listen, Onyx Ravens is a different conversation that I'm not ready to have because I'm so heartbroken.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, bringing in Ostriker as a coach, you get the vision. But yeah, bringing in Python as a player, I don't quite follow.
Sixer is the real question here.
Sixer at least is a true veteran who spent years playing Counter-Strike. Python was tier 2 for 4 years. Like,
listen, here's the thing. Python I could have seen frag out. Sixer, I'm not seeing frag out in any circumstances. Plus, like, listen, I will also add in, I think Ozzy Striker has done a terrible job coaching this team. I think this team has become worse underneath him, even if their players, for some reason, think, oh my God, we've learned so much. Where you've learned how to suck. That's what you've learned. You've learned how to not rotate because you're also scared of breaking the system. Your entire strengths have all been turned to dust because this weird rigidity that's being put into you. So yeah, this is obviously a team that I think has done a bad job of imports, not just now, but for the past 2-3 years in the Middle Eastern RMR. But they're not at the RMR, so I guess it's not about them and how much I hate the fact that Pokemon and Edram aren't making it through. My goats. Also, Taiki, shout out to Yusuf.
Also, that's another thing, isn't it? Because, you know, if Dobu is allowed to swap teams for Alter Ego, it's not like they couldn't have picked up, like, a Pokemon or an Edram or, you know...
Taiki?
Yes, yeah, or help Mini, I think also decent
Mini's
shout.
Low-key a monster. Like,
They could have got... No, I mean, they could have gotten Osama's. Osama's is literally the best region player coming out of this region.
It's like, right, there are so many people you could have actually taken that actually have a more legitimate claim.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Like, one rule for Alter Ego, and then, you know, are you forced to use a substitute if you were the Drillas? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, there's other ways they could have gone about this. Obviously, it's left everyone with a really bad taste in their mouth and just a bit of a frown as to like how they've managed to do this and why this was ever allowed.
If it wasn't framed as personal like displeasement in the direction of the team, if it was phrased in any other way, where it was like there are legitimate concerns, he cannot travel. We have to use a substitute. You know, if there were actually, it's like a Brovid situation where it's like, oh, he's ill. Oh no, we have to bring in Cadian, even though we replaced Bro on the team with him. Like they just decided to be a little ratty about the way they approached it.
The Blastralis situation is also worse just because they outright lied. There's no need to lie about this. You're allowed to make this one change after qualifying for the RMR and then the RMR happening. It's just that Astralis, that wasn't the case. It was just straight up just lying about a player being sick and unable to play. Like, that's a different exploitation of a rule that actually involved lying. This is just a bad rule.
Sure.
We have to be
that being
straight
said,
up
I will add the disclaimer that Blast, if you would like me to lie for you, I am available to be hired, guys.
Yeah, I can also perform very ground level, surface level background checks on stories people provide for me, especially if they're Danish. If they're Danish, you know, I can go, oh yes, I'll try to figure out what they're trying to tell me and then just pretend to check into the story they've told. I can do that too. Yeah, no worries.
It's called due diligence, I'll have you know.
Yeah, due diligence.dk though. Let's keep it above board what we're going for here.
Unironically though, like, these guys have very hard-hitting players. Like, the Drillas, the Drillas could legit. They legit could make it out of the major or into the major, and you know, we may be pissed about it, but like, they have talented pieces on this roster. Like, Waro is great, Krem is great, you know, Haji, pretty good.
If he's not your pinnacle, like the thing your team relies on winning. Yes, he's fine.
Yeah. He's good as a third or fourth best player on the team, you know.
Yeah, I don't want him taking, like, at various times in the French scene in the past, you know, being a more aggressive player, hit these important opening frags. Not where I want Haji. He's just not up to snuff, especially against players who can aim, and that's kind of been his issue in the past.
I also think Metztal is a very emotional player, and so when he's on land, I think he actually does get a buff. So.
You gotta respect Haji's game on Twitter, though, right? I mean, Aussie Striker calls him out for what he's done in the RMR. He just calls him bald. There you go. Can't come back from that, right?
Yeah, I guess. I've not paid attention. I've not noticed. I can be honest.
I'll show you the thread afterwards. It's funny.
I follow a very small number of people on Twitter because I don't want to be sucked into a lot of the bullshit, but that is pretty funny, to be fair. That's a good one. But I think we should wrap up here because I think we could go on all day about little issues like this when it comes to the RMR construction. But here we have our picks for you to see. Some people made some interesting choices. I'm going to be honest, I'm not too big a fan of my underdog pick, given how much these guys are sold on the rest of them. But hey, I still expect my favorites to get me a point, and that's what matters. TeaTime, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Michael's a coward.
You've been very knowledgeable about the scene, a very helpful guest. Yumi, you'll be here next time, so don't you worry. I'll thank you at the end of the year when you give money to charity again. And yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment telling us why we're wrong. We always appreciate those comments. And It's good for the interaction. Leave a sub if you want to see more. And remember that members get rights, so pay me. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
You have
Goodbye.
to pay for rights?
Of course.